Has this ever happened to you? I have a brand new water bottle and I can see too much of it. A blank water bottle can be an unsightly bore. Luckily, using our patented technology, there is a solution. There is? There sure is. It's called stickers. These incredible devices are covered in glue on one end and funny, attractive designs on the other. They are the ideal solution for any water bottle in need of a little pizzazz. How do I acquire these stickers? Well, fictional customer, I'm glad you asked. Just go to wildgreenmemes.com, that's wildgreenmemes.com, to grab your very own wild green stickers. Wow, thanks, mister. Now what do I do about my fridge? Just wait until we tell this guy about magnets. wildgreenmemes.com. This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett, and today on the show we have senior contributing editor at Mongabay and author Jeremy Hance, here to talk about his career and his recent reporting on the potential discovery of another Sumatran rhino individual. This is a big deal since the species likely has a population of less than 50 animals. Welcome, Jeremy. And how did you come to cover Sumatran rhinos generally and this story specifically?
So I've been a journalist since 2007. And I've been working with Mongabay. Well, started working with Mongabay then. That was my first article and stuff. I've been obsessed with the Sumatran rhino for a long time. 2009, I think, is when I first met a Sumatran rhino in real life, which you have to get special permission to do because there's none in captivity and for public viewing, obviously. So they are one of my favorite animals. They're so weird. They're the world's smallest rhino. They're hairy. They are constantly chattering and singing. They make these weird noises. Yeah, they sound like dolphins. We don't know why they do this. They're whistling kind of sounds, but then they also grunt. It's very strange. I think the theory is that they sort of do this in order to find each other in the forest. That's sort of I don't know, a wavelength thing they can do, with those noises, or to locate certain areas. Um, they're very when they're little, they're very cute, big round eyes, and they're just very strange. And I'm in love with animals that are weird and also endangered. So. They're probably the most endangered large mammal on the planet at this point. So we're down to between I think the latest numbers is 47 to 34 animals in the wild. And it's probably, I would guess it's closer to 34, or around thereabouts. We don't really know how many are left because they're so hard to find. They've gotten very good at hiding. And so I've been covering them for over almost 2 decades now. And I visited Indonesia twice, and I visited Malaysia twice, and each time to do with the Sumatran rhino stories and stuff. So I'm sort of the Sumatran rhino journalist. I'm the most, I've probably written more about the Sumatran rhino than any other person on Earth.
That's awesome. How did Sumatran rhinos come to be endangered? What brought us to this moment?
Sure. So with all rhinos, it's the poaching. But Sumatran rhinos, they're the oldest rhino on Earth in terms of evolution. So they're 15 million years old. They split off from other rhinos. So they're very, very different from other rhinos. And they would have been related to the woolly rhinoceros that went extinct during the Pleistocene. Yeah, and that's one reason why they have all this hair, right? Um, there was a time, I can't remember exactly how many thousands of years ago, when the sea level rose, probably at the end of the Ice Age, um, and they lost some habitat. But they used to be all over Southeast Asia, into China, and even at the edges of India. So they had a massive range, and then of course Sumatra, where they are now, Borneo. They had this massive range. So I think, and again, this is we don't really know what happened until the last they were not in our radar for until like 100 years ago, really. And even then, very little attention given them until the 1980s. So we don't really know what happened, but I would assume it's poaching. It's poaching for rhino horn. Hunting, probably initially it was hunting for meat. That's probably what took out the woolly rhino. And then now it's probably hunting. It was hunting for meat for many generations. That's what humans did to survive. And then it became a desire to get rhino horn for Chinese traditional medicine, which is a continual concern for the Sumatran rhino. They've still found, I think it was like a year ago, they caught somebody with Sumatran rhino horn, we believe.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, even though there's so few left. Now, how old that rhino horn is, we
Mhm.
don't really know. But it really is for the last couple centuries, it was poaching. And then they would get down to a size of population where there'd only be two or three individuals left in a large area.
Mhm.
And then you're having an issue where they're not finding each other, they're getting too old to breed. And so there's all sorts of these issues that came out when we did try and start capturing them for breeding because we were getting old animals because they had breeding issues. Um, but eventually we've found some success in captive breeding.
Is the situation that there's actually habitat for them out there that's just
Yeah,
empty because of the hunting?
100%.
That's crazy. That's such an unusual problem. It's usually habitat kind of neck and neck with poaching.
Yeah, so it usually is that. And it's not like Southeast Asia and Indonesia isn't losing forests at an incredible rate, right? They
Mhm.
are. Borneo, Indonesia, Southeast Asia has lost a lot of forest. But there's still a lot of highland forests. There's still a lot of areas where they used to live, where they don't live, that has forests. I've been to parks where there was a population, and they told this is back in 2009, and they were like, oh yeah, we think there's probably 40 rhinos here. There's none there now.
Wow.
So it's not that we don't have capacity to have them. Um, it's just that they're being hunted out. It's kind of like a similar situation to certain species of tiger or subspecies of tiger,
Mhm.
where there is land, but the tigers have just been wiped out of those areas in Southeast Asia for poaching or snaring too is a really big issue.
How did you come to this particular story?
So because I've been writing about Sumatran rhinos for so long, I kind of have some really good sources that I go to.
Mhm.
And International Rhino Foundation is one of them. And what happened was there was every 3 years they release a report about rhino populations, and so they'll release this and it'll be like an update on, okay, how are the black rhinos doing, how are the white rhinos doing, how are Indian rhinos, etc., etc. And so I saw that Sumatran rhinos, 34 to 47 in the wild, and so I reached out to somebody that I know, Nina Facion. She runs the International Rhino Foundation. Talked to her on the phone, and she was like, "Oh, Jeremy, I have some interesting news for you." Like, and I thought it was gonna be. I honestly thought it was gonna be off the record.
Mhm.
Like sometimes you'll have sources that will be like, "Ooh, I've got some news," but they'll be like, "This is off the record." But she was like, "You know what? The Indonesian government already shared this on Facebook, so you can write an article about it." So that's how I got the sort of the scoop, really, on this story.
So they thought there could be a rhino or a few rhinos still in this park, but they weren't sure. So they called in Working Dogs for Conservation.
Yeah, so Working Dogs for Conservation is an organization that uses dogs to track animals, even plants in some cases, because dogs have such an incredible sense of smell. They can find things that people can't. And so this is a park, Way Kambas National Park down in southern Sumatra, where basically conservationists, there used to be rhinos there. We know there used to be rhinos there. But basically conservationists had sort of given up hope. And I had too. I was like, there's no rhinos left, like there's a theme with these rhinos where you'll assume there'll be rhino tracks for a while, there'll be maybe a couple camera traps, and you'll assume there's a larger population than there actually is. They had not been able to camera trap them for years. And so, sort of the word going around the rhino circles was that this park was probably empty of rhinos, most likely. And so, Nina, in her wisdom, was like, okay, it's probably gone. We're pretty sure it's gone, but let's do one last thing to check. We've tried camera traps, we have rangers in the field looking for them. We're doing everything we can on the ground, but let's try this one last thing, which is to bring in working dogs for conservation, bring in this organization. And so they basically took two dogs, flew them over to Sumatra, which must have been quite the journey. Brought them to the Sumatran Rhino Sanctuary, where we have captive rhinos, captive Sumatran rhinos in a breeding program, not for public viewing, but that's for security reasons. The dogs worked with the rhinos, smelled their poop, did it with males, females, juveniles. They have babies there. And then they put the dogs in the wild, and it didn't take very long for the dogs to find what we think is Sumatran rhino scat.
I think about that sometimes in my personal life, just with my dog. I'll go for a hike and I'll find a bear track and I'll realize, I mean, my dog probably knows there's bears around in that area all the time. Like it's
Yeah.
probably not that surprising to them. On its face, it's crazy what they can find.
Yes. I mean, and these are literally animals that have somehow large, big animals, even though they're smallest rhino, they're massive,
Yeah.
and somehow avoiding camera traps for years.
Yeah,
And
that's wild.
there's and rangers would tell me this in the field. They'd be like, "Oh no, the rhinos are very good at avoiding camera traps." And I was like, "Really? That seems that seems wishful thinking a little bit." But it could be that they're smelling human scent on them,
Huh.
and that they're so conditioned to avoiding humans because of poaching over how many generations of rhinos, that they maybe are avoiding those areas, or maybe
Wow.
those are areas where those are areas that people check. They have to go and check these cameras. So maybe the rhinos are just have gotten better at avoiding them. I don't know if that's true or not. But for some reason, yeah, the dogs were able to pick it up much faster. And so we might have a few more rhinos out there than we thought.
Right now, where does it stand? In the article, you said that they had several tests they had to go through to confirm that the poop they found was from Sumatran rhinos.
So one of the three tests has come back as a positive for Sumatran rhino. They're in the process of doing the next two tests. I'll probably reach out to them soon. I'm not sure how long these tests take, just to check in. But I was told that they would let me know when they got the final one so we can do another article. And we don't know what that means in terms of numbers. Because we haven't seen them for so long, it probably doesn't mean a lot of rhinos. It probably means a few.
Mhm.
Maybe only one, maybe two or three, maybe, if we're lucky, four or five, who knows? But we don't really know what that means in terms of numbers. But even if we could find one or two rhinos in that area, it's flat land, it's on a riverbed, and so it would be relatively easier potentially to capture the rhino and bring it into captivity, which would be the goal. Bring it into the captive population that we have right now. There are currently 11 rhinos in captivity.
That's so small.
Yeah, although it's more than there used to be. We
Sure.
had two births in 2023. We're now up to 11, which I think I'm trying to think of how small. I think it was down to like seven at one point.
Mhm.
But all the rhinos in captivity, all the males are interrelated.
Mhm.
So they have a direct descendant named Ipu, who used to be at the Cincinnati Zoo, who passed away many years ago. But he is the direct ancestor of all the living male rhinos. So the trouble we have with the captive rhino breeding program is that there's only 11 for one thing, and all the males are related. So what we really need to do is find another male or two, hopefully. Females would be great too, obviously, but find some other genetics that we could add to the mix so that the rhinos aren't so closely related. The most recent rhino that was born was a uncle and niece relationship,
Mhm.
right? And that's not the preference. We
Right.
don't want to be doing that. But conservationists aren't super concerned about that right now. But like in a generation or two, if we don't get more rhinos, that could become a real issue for their health.
Those kind of crazy bottlenecks tend to come back and bite eventually. But it's
Exactly.
always better to do something than nothing, though. So I'm glad that they're even trying with the 11.
Yeah, it's an emergency situation, and the genetic and the research has shown that for ungulates like rhinos, genetic bottlenecks are not as devastating as some other animals.
Hmm.
They could probably bounce back pretty good. Like there's the story of the European bison, which I think was down to 14 animals when they started, and now there's like four or 500, and they're rewilding it all over Europe. So I think of that as a nice connection to this one, that we can do a small number of animals and build that population up.
Right.
It's just going to take time, and it would be great to have a few more rhinos to really make sure that we can.
When you're covering things in general, how do you think about what you're interested in covering? How do you think about a story with regards to conservation or the environment?
What you're interested in covering depends on like kind of your position in an organization.
Hmm.
So like right now I'm an editor and writer, so I do a lot of editing, but I'm also have some leeway since I've been working and been around for a while to like if I see a story like this, I can just go ahead and and write
Right.
that. Or if I'm working with a specific editor on a specific article, I love writing about weird animals. That's one of my favorite. That's what drew me to the Sumatran rhino in the first place. I love writing about animals that most people have not heard of. People have obviously heard of rhinos, but I bet you a lot of people have never heard of Sumatran rhinos. Even in Indonesia, even though that's where they live, it's very little known compared to, say, of course, the tiger or elephant or something like that. But you don't see images of them in Indonesia very much, right? It's not a known quantity. So I really like to write about weird animals. I also do a lot of writing about climate change, geoengineering, indigenous people. Those are probably my other and forests and rainforests, which is what Mongabay is really known for, is our forests and wildlife kind of coverage around the world.
That's a really interesting scope that kind of covers the whole gamut.
I've written a lot of articles. It's in the thousands. So yeah, all under really the environmental umbrella. But yeah, I've done a lot of writing. It's a real joy to be able to discover new places and new species and write about something you didn't know existed, a week ago.
Did you have a weird animal that got you into it, or did you kind of come to that after you were already doing environmental journalism?
Oh, that's a good question. My first article was about the Yangtze River dolphin, the Baji, which went extinct, or we believe is extinct, in 2007, I think is when they announced it. And that was my first article was about that species and sort of my own emotional emotional frustration that it went extinct and it was so little. It passed through the newspapers and the media without much attention. So that was my first article. So I think, but when I was a kid, I loved wild animals. I was obsessed with all kinds of different animals. I was loved going to the zoo, wanted to be a zookeeper. So I've always had an affinity for strange wild creatures. And I think, when I hit adulthood and got into journalism, it was really a natural fit to keep doing that. And it's still like just my favorite thing about the job is writing about species that people haven't heard about or need attention. A lot of the most endangered species in the world don't have a lot of conservation attention because they're weird, small, strange, just little known. Don't even, some of them don't have much research attention. So that is one place where I see my role is to try and shed light on these animals.
We considered doing a series of reels about endangered species and like the US Endangered Species Act, but
Sure.
it surprised me, even out of those, a lot of them there's like no photos of even.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's like 40% Hawaiian plants, but like a lot of them we had to change how we were going to do that just because there was nothing to work with in terms
Yeah.
of media for a lot of this stuff. It kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, there's these, what I would consider cool, charismatic animals that we have almost no photos of, that we have no videos of, just things that you would think in this day and age, right? Where we where we are so technologically advanced
Yeah.
that it would be easy, but like sometimes it's just a stuffed creature from the 19th century, and that's all we really have. And we don't even know if they're still out there. And so that's part of the fun of the job is to write about things like that and try and shed light in it. It's also part of the frustrations of the job is like, wait, how can we not even know if this animal is still around or have good images of it or have film, Camera trapping has changed that to a certain extent, but even camera traps, it's hard to get small animals. It's hard to get birds, depending on if the species is not landing on the ground and stuff. But it's at least brought more attention and more ability to conservationists.
Are there any areas within conservation that you think I mean, it's all kind of underrepresented, but that it should get more coverage than it does even within the block of coverage that exists now?
For me, given that we have the internet now, we have YouTube, I think people fall in love with strange animals more easily now and can get their information. So like, for example, when I was starting out, the pangolin was not really a well-known commodity. I feel like today it is much more well-known, just through YouTube videos, through articles, through the fact that they're being poached towards extinction right now. I think the pangolin is having a little bit of a moment, and I think that's great. And so I would say I would love to see more organizations focus on lesser known, strange species. Especially, I don't if it's an animal that's doing fine, whatever. But when it's an animal that's on the edge of extinction or close to extinction, or we don't know if it's still out there, I would love to see conservation organizations putting more money into that. I would love to see the media spending more time on that. I think those stories are really exciting. They're kind of like adventure stories. When you get an expedition out there to find something, it's a really exciting story. And yet, for whatever reason, it's a hard one to find people to publish those kinds of stories. This is a different species, but I did a story a little while ago, like last year, on the saola, which is a very strange animal out of Southeast Asia. And they're literally in the field right now with working dogs for conservation looking for that, hoping to find it using the same conservation type dogs to try and find its scat. And I did a whole story about that expedition, and I was in love with it. I was like, this is so cool. They're out there. They're in like one of the most remote parts of the world. The conditions are appalling. There's mosquitoes everywhere. It's wet. Then you're climbing mountains trying to find this one species that is so cool. And I had a really hard time finding a place to publish it. So it just goes to show you that, like, if it's not about tigers and elephants and lions and some of those, some of our most beloved species, it can be hard to get the media that these species deserve.
There's kind of like a randomness function with the internet that I've noticed, where it seems like every year or two there's a completely unrelated animal that'll start trending, and it's like pangolins. I think about 10 years ago it was sloths were the first time that I noticed this. It'll come and then they don't stay there, but they'll wind up, I think people add them to their list of animals. They're like, oh, there's giraffe, there's elephant, there's pangolins now, and it's like slowly growing that way.
I think that's so true. And like my goal would be to like just add all the animals that are endangered to that list. Just get people that really care about the saola and the solenodons and the Sumatran rhinos of the world would be just wonderful. And it's it's also just a thing where, like, when you find out about a species you never knew about, it's exciting. And you realize how big and beautiful our world is, and maybe that makes you care a little more.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave off. We'll look forward to hearing more developments as we find out if they found those rhinos.
Yeah, look to Mongabay. It'll be up there.
Do you have anything else you want to plug?
I have a book called Baggage: Confessions of a Globetrotting Hypochondriac, which is about Sumatran rhinos, but it's about my adventures around the world as I look for these species to write about. While I struggle with OCD, anxiety, and depression. So it's basically me freaking out in the field as I follow conservationists around the world. It's not a downer. It's a very funny book. It's written to be funny, but it takes a long look at sort of where we are conservation-wise. And it has a lot of cool, weird animals in it. It has the Sumatran rhino. It has Solenodon. It has Slowloris. It has a lot of fun rhinos, fun places, and really cool people. So I'll plug that.
I'll have to check that out. I've been looking for something to read.
Yeah, check it out. It's fun. It's a good adventure read with a bad traveler.
Thanks, Jeremy. Links to the article and book will be in the description of this episode. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/wildgreenmemes. That's memes with an M. Our intro and outro music is by RX Fire. Until next time, I'm Rhett, and happy Year of the Frog.